Welcome to the Rooted in Freedom podcast. If you're a parent and your child is just about to join university or has just joined, this conversation is for you. My name is Dr. Wanjiku Maruti, and I have keen interest in how young people navigate transitions in life. And one thing I have seen consistently is that success is not just about intelligence. It's about how prepared someone is for the change and independence. Because let's be honest, when the admission letter comes in, you feel like, oh, we've made it. After all the school fees we paid, the early mornings, extra tuition, it feels like the job is done. But today we want to ask a different question. Is your child truly ready? Because university doesn't just test intelligence, it tests character, discipline, and decision making. And today, I'm joined by Liz Ndungi, who is a counseling psychologist and has worked closely with students transitioning into university. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Wanjiku, for having me to this podcast. My name is Liz Ndungi, and I'm a counseling psychologist working with teens in high schools and young adults in colleges and universities. I also work with teens as they transition to the next level of higher education, that is when they're joining tertiary colleges and universities, to help them thrive in life. So over the years, I've worked with many young people. Some will thrive, others will struggle, and I've seen clear patterns in what makes the difference. So I'm glad we're actually having this conversation, because these are things that many parents are thinking about, but not always discussing them openly.
Thank you, Liz. And we are going to start right there where you've talked about your experience and some of the shocks that you've seen students experience when they move from home or even boarding school, which is the reality in our country, Kenya, into university or college life. Tell us more about that shock and that transition.
Wow, yes. I think for majority of them, the biggest shock is freedom, especially for students who have been in boarding schools where everything is structured. You know when to wake up, you know when to study, you know when to sleep. Everything is completely organized. Then suddenly you find yourself, you're in university and nobody is checking. So you just have to decide everything for yourself. And while that freedom is actually exciting, but it can also be quite overwhelming when you're unprepared.
Thank you for bringing that home or starting us off from that point of the first initial shock that students encounter. And that is quite powerful. And that helps us also move to the next part of this conversation. Can you give us real examples of students who have seemed to be having everything right? You know, the good students that we all see, they have good grades, they went to good schools, and in fact, they're disciplined. You know, when you look at them at home and in the society, like their interaction at church and other places, they are doing good. But some of them actually do struggle when they go to college or university. Can you tell us more about examples that you've seen around that?
Yeah, that happens quite often, actually. Unfortunately, two cases come to mind. I remember this particular one of a young man, student, top of their class, was the dining hall captain of their high school, very prestigious, school. He qualified to study architecture in University of Nairobi. And the first semester, he was actually doing very well. And by the second semester, he started out hanging with the wrong crowd, then started missing classes, and then he got into drugs. And by the time the parents were noticing, he had missed a whole year of study, and they had to go through a series of rehab a couple of times to have him stabilized. And what would have taken like 5 years took him 9 years to accomplish. He is still actually in school and he hasn't yet finished. Now, the other case that I also am aware of is of this particular girl, stellar performance from primary school straight through high school, completed again top of their class, admitted to study medicine. And medicine requires rigor. It requires commitment. It requires, someone to be really organized with their time. But for some reason, she couldn't keep up with the schedules. And so she started complaining to her parents that she wanted to take a less demanding course. But the parents could not hear any of it. They had invested so much, like any parents. So they wouldn't budge. And they told her to continue pursuing and just struggle to just stay in there and see what happens. So she stayed in there, but she wasn't in there per se because she stopped focusing on her studying so much. And again, she moved again with the wrong people. And then she started failing, but the parents were not aware. They just continued paying the school fees, supporting her, dropping her, picking her. But although the parents could sense there was something wrong, they were not really sure what it was. So they continued paying the school fees. And then a few follow-up. One time the father decided, let me just do a follow-up. And they just realized the person has not even been attending classes. They have failed quite a number of subjects. They were supposed to receive that they have not researched. And suffice to say, they helped the girl back on her feet through a lot of coaching and therapy. But it was really difficult for them to really understand what actually went wrong, because this someone was really doing very well. And now they could not even relate with the person who they were having at that particular time. So yes, that happens.
Thank you, Liz. And what you've described shows that when things go wrong, they affect both the parents and their child. This young adult who's trying to figure out their life in a new environment that sometimes they're not well prepared for. And what also you've said shows that even well-disciplined children who excelled in their previous education systems, like in high school and all, are also coming to struggle. So my question at this point is, what causes these children to lose direction?
Yeah, that's a very important question, because I think a majority of them, especially coming from high school, through primary, through high school, they're used to the external discipline, where the structure, the environment provides the structure. So they are good at following rules or just complying so that they can actually survive in high school, but not necessarily at creating their own value system. So that's what happens. But university requires some level of internal discipline, intrinsic motivation, the internal drive that causes someone to just engage in activities for their own sake. And it's actually not driven by because someone is going to reward you for something or someone is going to applaud you, no accolades. And there's enough pressure that you're doing it just for your own personal fulfillment and for your own curiosity, and you're just enjoying whatever it is that you're doing. So if that is not well developed at early onset, then the environment that they find themselves in starts to shape them.
Thank you, Liz. And I like what you talked about there, that internal drive is what makes the difference, the intrinsic motivation, because it looks like when this transition happens, they move from a system where the motivation was external. The school has systems in place, their time is so structured, and so children just follow that system that's already set up. And when they come to university, while there are some systems that have been set up, what makes the difference for people who succeed and those who kind of struggle is that those who succeed have internal drive, they have intrinsic motivation. And it feels like that is something we need to focus on a little bit more. So now, bringing it back to parents who are listening, the biggest question now is, if your child had full freedom today, no supervisors, no routine, no systems, what would guide their decisions? Would it be pressure, the environment, or something else?
Yeah, that's a very key question you're raising, Dr. Wanjiku, because what guides them in that particular moment is not what you actually been telling them. It's what they have actually been, the value system that they have been built in for themselves. So besides that, it's also the values that you have also inculcated upon them, because these people not only listen to what you're saying, they also observe you. So it's their confidence that they have. It's their ability to say no to negative pressure. That is what is actually showing when no one is watching. And that's why it's important. This is the work for parents, to build and nurture intrinsic motivation from a very tender age. This is more of a parental responsibility and not a school responsibility, because teenagers don't just become adults in one day. They transition into adulthood. They need guidance and support in that transition process. And so by the time they're getting to university, they need to have mastered something like self-discipline, and they know how to manage their time properly. And they have independent living skills, so that they know that if I have this amount of money, this money is likely to last me this period of time. They can take care of themselves. Basic hygiene, for instance. Can they make their beds? Can they clean their clothes? And I believe that they can make good decisions if they have been raised well, and also they have been provided with the support that they need during this phase of their life. Remember, as a parent at this time when they are teenagers, you're ceasing from a space of now being a manager to becoming sort of like a coach. You're working with them as a coach, and you're level of authority is actually reducing as your level of influence increases. So there is need for sort of like a balance between authority and influence for the teenagers, so as they transition to this level. But it is very, very important for parents to start thinking about their journey of transition into university.
Thank you, Liz. This has been such an important conversation in terms of setting the context for what Rooted in Freedom should be about. And in the next episode, we'll go deeper, looking at where, despite all the effort and sacrifice, parents might unknowingly be getting it wrong. Stay with us.